Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for March 10th, 2025. Here we go. We are going to start with item 1, audience communications. I do not see any blue slips this evening, so we can move right ahead to item 2, Committee of the Whole. And we're going to go to item 2A, the annual review of bylaw of the board BHA Code of Ethics. So at our Committee of the Whole meeting, at our study session last week, we went over the bylaws and we made some changes to those bylaws. And I just want to make sure that everybody has taken a look at the following bylaws that we did decide to change. And the first one is number 7. I will come to board meetings prepared to discuss and take action on all agenda items. I will read and study the board meeting information, seeking clarification if needed prior to each board meeting. Does that sound okay to everyone for that change?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the next page, and it's the first bullet point, and it is, I will work with my fellow board members toward consensus when making decisions. Once a decision is made, I will support the decision and its implementation. All right, so that was that all right? And then the one underneath it was, I recognize that while I am free to express my personal views, the board president is the spokesperson for the board and the superintendent is the spokesperson for the district. And then we added, this includes all written and spoken communications, including social media. Okay. All right, and I think those were the only changes that we made to that. I believe tonight were we going to read them out loud this evening, or do we have to?
No, my recollection, President Bradford, was that because the board did that at the study session, that we would simply see if there were any other changes, and then we would bring this forward next week for the first reading.
Okay, yep, first reading, and then we would have to wait until the next board meeting to
adopt them.
To adopt them,
Yes.
and that's when we would sign
And then we
them.
would sign, yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding anything on the Code of Ethics? Okay, all right, then we'll move on. Okay, we'll move on to item 2, the review of bylaw of the board BCB, general order of business at regular meetings. Okay, so at the study session, we also discussed our order of business and whether or not we still would like to, at every regular meeting, ask about if there's any written communications and also response to prior audience communications. And at the study session, we decided that we felt comfortable enough with changing the, to taking those two pieces out of there and also just going with audience communications. And then if anybody had any written communications or if we had a response, we would be able to do a point of order. Yes.
Thank you, President Bradford. Yes, with regard to written communications, this has been in here for a few decades now as part of the agenda. And this was more common when people would send written communications and ask, for instance, the secretary to the board to distribute to the board. And so we would do that at board meetings. Most communications now come electronically or in your packet. And then with regard to response to prior audience communication, that is also very, very rarely used by the board. And I believe what the board would choose to do instead is obviously either the board or the administration will respond to any specific question listed on the audience communication form. And the board would always have the opportunity to make a broad response in prior audience communications and could do so as a point of privilege.
Okay, perfect. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. Regarding response to prior audience communications, before we had electronic communications, sometimes we would have to wait until the next meeting to respond to a comment that had been made. But now we can, and usually do, respond much sooner, so that the person who has brought this issue forward doesn't have to wait till the next meeting, and we can work with them sooner to get their issues resolved. So it really doesn't need to be on the agenda anymore, just, it's not used.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Acosta?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that this does not make any changes to our current practices. We already have the system in place with the blue slips where if there is a response that is requested, that is done by the request of the speaker while they're communicating on the blue slip, so that there is no change to our current practice. This is just reflecting that.
That's a great point. Yes, thank you for making that. Any other questions or comments regarding this? Okay, this will also be put on for a first reading at the next meeting. All right, and that concludes the Committee of the Whole. We're going to move on to item 3, the Finance Committee, and Mr. Johnson, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, President Bradford. We have 2 items tonight, both with the help of Mrs. Smith. And the first is our financial update.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to the board for the time we were able to spend last week at the study session going over this update. So nothing new since last week, but for the benefit of our community, I'll share what I had shared with the board last week. We have a rather straightforward update for the month of March for the current school year. This year we started off with $33.3 million, and we're anticipating ending the school year with $31.4 million. That was as of our December budget amendment. I have good news to share on the revenue front, as I did last week, that the revenue we were projecting to earn on our investments is up. I had budgeted for us to receive $100,000 a month in interest earnings on our general fund dollars, and that's going to be more like $1.9 million. So that's an additional $700,000 of revenue. So wonderful news for the general fund. Another general fund adjustment we have for this school year is our Section 29, the enrollment stabilization categorical. The good news is we are not down as many students as we were in prior years, but what that means for this categorical that's meant to help offset the effects of declining enrollment in districts is that we're going to get less money from that categorical. So we're going to make up for it in the foundation allowance, which is great. So with those 2 factors into place, and also the fact that I don't see any need to make any adjustments on the expenditure side, that'll have us ending this school year with $31.9 million, or a 17.2% fund balance. And we've been aiming for a number of years to try to land that within 15 to 20%. That's the amount recommended by the experts at the Michigan School Business Officials. Many reasons why a district would want to hold a healthy fund balance. You know, primarily it's the stability that it offers our district, that when there's changes at the state level for our funding, we have the ability to sometimes weather those changes and see if they are going to come to fruition and not have to make such reactionary things to, that might interrupt our programming. It also helps us with not having to do any cash flow borrowings. We haven't had to do that for at least a decade because we've had a healthy fund balance that's helped us get through the months when we don't get a state aid payment, like in September. So happy to report that we're in that range. We also have gotten an update, from the governor as far as her projected budget for the next school year, and we went over that last week. Positive news on the foundation allowance front. She is proposing an increase of $392, which would put our foundation allowance at $10,000. But unfortunately, there's some other changes in the budget related to the retirement rate that are going to offset that by probably at least $2 million. So a number of things last year transpired. There was a discussion about them lowering the employer retirement rate by 5.75%. And this is where I went into detail on the memo, so I know you guys have read that. And for any community members that would be interested in knowing more about that, I'd refer you to the memo on our website. But long story short, I'll try to summarize a complex thing. The retirement rate that employers pay here in the state of Michigan is made up of 4 different components. There's the normal cost, the pension UAAL, the health normal costs, and the defined contributions. The pension normal cost is increasing for next year, and generally it does increase from year to year, so that didn't come as a surprise. It's going from 9.15% to 10.87% effective October 1st, 2025. The defined contribution amount is going to stay the same. The pension UAAL, which is the one that they were targeting to lower by 5.75, is going to be lower by 5.75%. But what they've done is increased the health normal cost. So last year, or this current year, I should say, we're paying 1.25% for employees that are enrolled in that plan, and that is now going up to 3.83%. So that's a very large jump. And, we knew that the state was talking about no longer taking the 3% from employees, and that was welcome news because we heard that that fund was fully funded, so that didn't come as a total surprise. But what did is what appears to be a shift in the cost from employees to the employer. So thankfully, they've, put a foundation allowance increase in place, but I think the headlines kind of stop there and people think, oh, the schools are getting more money. They don't hear the second part, that our retirement rate is increasing such that a large chunk of that's going to get eaten up by additional retirement costs. So we still have two more. We have the House and the Senate versions of the budget to review when those come out. I believe it's the House maybe that we've gotten a preliminary look at. Their budget also closely aligns with the governor's foundation allowance increase. I have not dug into all the different categoricals, so we'll definitely report back out to you on that front. But these retirement rates, in my time, I've never seen them change once they're published, and they are published for October 1st. So the retirement rate costs are definitely going to go up. And now, hopefully, it's advocating for some revenue to help offset those costs. So that is the scoop for our financial update for March. We'll, of course, keep you updated as we get more information.
Questions? Vice President Frank.
Thank you. Just disappointment that I think that we want to communicate to our community that we're disappointed in this budget. It seemed like with the 392, it seems like there's so many things that are good news, and then to kind of go back on what they had said about the retirement reimbursements and the costs is really disappointing. And so, it really costs the districts whenever they take that kind of money. So we're hoping that there's some kind of reversal, some kind of way that they can make the school districts whole on that, because it does come out of the kids, and we're harming the kids on this. And so the classrooms are a big part of what we are using that money for. We're using money for mental health, some of our other things, and Superintendent Oquist can speak more to that, but we're just disappointed, I think, in that piece of it. So not with you, but
Yes.
just with the legislature and
Absolutely.
that proposal.
Other questions? Just one question and then a comment. On the pension normal cost, you said it went up
Yep.
from 9.15 to 10.87.
Correct.
And it normally goes up.
It does. Yeah.
Was this an average increase? Was it higher or lower than normal?
I would say a little higher than normal. I don't think I've seen it more than 1%.
Yeah.
So we're over 1%. So that would be abnormally high increase. But yeah, if that alone was what had changed, not totally a surprise, but that paired with the health percent increase are coming as a surprise. And I don't feel like there was a ton of discussion, again,
Right.
when they are touting these record-breaking increases for schools, they don't explain fully that that's not all usable funds for us, that they're already earmarked with, again, retirement costs. So that's disappointing.
Well, and then the comment is, they're always going to tout the good news.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to tell you that on the backside, what they give you, with the, I'll just say, the governor giveth, the governor taketh away.
Yeah.
And then they bury that in the numbers. And we can see from your memo, which was very comprehensive, we can sit here and read it and understand not necessarily all the numbers, but the complexity of what goes into this. And someone up there in Lansing sits there and figures out all of this to take away what they're giving on the other side, just sort of even it out from their perspective. But it really doesn't help us. And I think, as Mrs. Frank said, they're harming the kids. They're not harming me. They're not harming you, but they're harming our students. And I think they need to think about that a little bit more, and when they put these numbers together and how they giveth and taketh.
And,
Yes, birthday girl.
Thank you. I think the bottom line is, and I like how this is written, her budget included the 392 per pupil increase, but then when you go down and you speak of it, after everything's said and done, the increase really equates to $157 per pupil. So that's telling right there. And I think that's something that our community would be able to understand, that through, they tout it as $392, but once the healthcare and the retirement costs that we have to incur come in, we're down to $157 per pupil. So they should really be saying it's $157 per pupil
Yeah.
increase, to be honest, when all is said and done. So that's the bottom line for me, and it is very disappointing, I think. And I agree with Mrs. Frank, if they can come up with some additional revenue to offset that, I think that would be great, but I'm not holding my breath for that.
They seem to like all the 147s. We are up to like 6 or 7 of those, so maybe they'll add a new section 147 categorical to help offset the cost. We'll see. We'll keep our fingers crossed and obviously advocate any chance we get.
Thank you.
Okay, no more questions on that? Then we'll move to B, this is the fun stuff.
It
The
is.
LPS merchandise purchase.
Yes, this is a fun one. We're very happy to bring this to the board and appreciate the board's continued support for this item. So what started off as just a creative idea of a way to recognize our staff every May is, there's the 1 week in May that's designated as, Teacher Appreciation Week, and obviously we expand that to include more than our teachers, which are fabulous, but we've got nearly 2,000 staff, about half of those teachers and then half of those support staff. So we've, been brainstorming different ways to recognize them, and a few years back, we started offering a merchandise store that every staff member could go on and select a piece of merchandise that they liked that has our LPS logo on it, so they can wear those with pride in the district, and of course, I see some tonight, which I love. And it's been really well received by the staff. They just love it. And we offered some new items this past year, and those were well received. Since starting this, we've worked with this company, MBS, here in Michigan, and they do a phenomenal job. They really do handle it from start to finish for us. They have the website that they create for us that staff can then go on and make their selections. If there's any question, perhaps a staff member selected 2 items instead of the 1, they'll reach out to the staff member and clarify which piece they'd like. They then individually bag each order. They deliver those to each one of our schools, follow up if there's any issues. So they've done just a wonderful job for us. So I would like to recommend that we continue to work with MBS. And I'm requesting an allocation of $60 per staff member. And with about 2,000 staff members, that would be $120,000. This is something that hasn't been included in our general fund budget, but I would like to bring this forward for your approval at next week's board meeting to get your blessing to move forward with that.
Questions?
Oh, I think that's great. We love it. Fully support that.
Question I have, and we've been doing this for a number of years now. How do we do in terms of, we have about 2,000 staff. Do we really hit the 2,000? Are we below that? Are we pretty close to it?
Generally, we get a great turnout.
We do.
Not quite
Wonderful.
2,000, but maybe if I had to go off my memory, like 1,600 at
16 to
least,
1,700,
17,
yeah.
which
Oh, that's
is
great.
phenomenal.
Phenomenal
Yeah.
response. Yeah.
So, yeah. So it gives us, I don't want to have to come back for additional authorization, so I'd rather come to you assuming everybody's going to get on and pick a piece, and then if we don't, obviously that's money that we don't spend and then just stays in our general fund.
Okay. And it's just something to give back to our staff.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on that, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you, Mrs. Smith. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. That concludes finance.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. What a great job you did. Moving on to item 4.
present to you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Item 4, the Curriculum Committee. Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you, President Bradford. I believe we have no, right, Mrs. O'Brien?
We do not.
We have no items
We do not.
to report on this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. All right, moving on to item 5, Building and Site Committee. Mrs. Burton is not here this evening, so I was going to go ahead and see if Mr. Johnson, you would take that.
I will take care of that.
Okay, thank
We
you.
have 3 items tonight, and our first is our Media Center Technology 2021 bond. And here's Phil.
Is that what we're doing now? Good evening, everybody. The first item we have this evening is titled the 2025 Media Center Tech 2021 Bond. This is really the standard item that we've brought each year for summer work. A quick overview of what I'm talking about is this isn't necessarily, there are some, the items aren't necessarily new. They're either replacing or adding to spaces from mostly the media center. In my memo to you, you may have noticed that I mentioned the kitchen as well. That doesn't mean we're putting screens and those types of things in the kitchens, but we do have to put new Ethernet into the kitchens when we renovate them, because the computers they use for the students that get their meals and they have the cards, et cetera, all of that is computerized. It's all using the internet and the computer. And we also do have some other items that work off of the internet in there. So the vast majority of these items are for the LMC. When we come in and the construction crew basically completely tears everything out of the LMCs because we're doing so much remodeling in there. Most of the items are items you're familiar with. Beyond the cabling and the Ethernet work, we have screens, we have short throws, we have those types of items that we put into the LMC. Some are brand new. For example, when we build the flex classroom in an LMC, it wasn't a classroom before, so it doesn't have any of the items that you would need to run the computers, the short throw, everything else. So all those items come in. This year, Moss Telecommunications is the low responsible bidder. If you looked through IDS's memo, actually there were two that had a lower apparent number, but they had missed scope. The last few years, Amcom Telecommunications, they've done quite a bit of work in the district. They were the company that has been doing the work, but there's an increase in their costs. So after checking with our attorney, our legal counsel, they said if they can't hold the same price, you have to take it back out. We did, and as you can see, Amcom just missed. They came in just after Moss Telecommunications. So this is pretty standard work, and we're excited for it because, believe it or not, we're pushing mid-March, and after spring break, we're going to be taking over, or at spring break, we're taking over those LMCs and those 4 buildings. So here we go again.
Okay, questions?
Question.
Mrs. Frank?
This might be a question for one of your friends, but video signage, how are those being implemented? Are we utilizing those? Sometimes when I go to a building, maybe they're blank. Are we just doing it because we've done it with all the other schools? Are the schools actually utilizing those video signs that are in the buildings?
The signage in it, I know it's listed like this, but I know the screens we're putting in like the high school LMC. So that is part of the screens. All those screens, they're basically TVs that we run off of signage. The schools that have signage generally do handle what they're running themselves.
Okay.
And some are more robust in how they use them and what they advertise. I know when I walk into different buildings, there's like the events that are coming up, and if it's a high school, it might have been like, hey, snow coming is coming, is this date, et cetera. Others just aren't as much so. Maybe don't have as many activities. I don't want to speak for someone in a building that how they're utilizing them. We can check in with them. I know that we put them in the ECC, in those, in the new ECC, in the great room. No, in those big family, or not the family rooms, but the
mudrooms.
The mudrooms, thank you. I was blanking on it. And the mudrooms, et cetera. So they're utilized. Those are really at the school and building level as to how and what they put on those monitors.
Okay, thanks.
In the LMC proper, you've already experienced how we use those when we were at Stevenson last month. You know, and they want to use those for staff meetings and professional development, et cetera.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Francis, have we used Moss in the past?
Not to my knowledge. IDS has, and they've partnered with them at other districts, and they noted that they've done good work.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything else on that. We'll bring that
Please.
to the regular meeting. Item 5B, Stevenson Tennis Court resurface.
I'm going to start by apologizing. I did not introduce Colin Frank from Plant Moran Real Point. I'm so used to the Brian just plopping down. But Colin, and I think many of you have met Colin in the past.
Yes, we have.
And he and Brian are in the district, and LPS is a little bit newer to Colin, but you've been with us since last school year, right?
It's been almost 2 years
Yeah.
I've been involved now.
Yeah. So,
Goes fast.
Colin is going to sit with us and talk a little bit about the next couple of items. I'll lead us off on the Stevenson tennis court resurfacing. This is something that we put quite a bit of information, I put into the memo, and that was done in partnership with Plant Moran Real Point, myself. Mrs. Oquist had access to that. We put through, just to give you the background, and I apologize, at the study session, I presumed that everybody knew what I was talking about, and that happens to me sometimes. I'll just kind of start jumping into a topic, and I was like, oh, I didn't give you the background, I thought you knew. So I do want to give you, and if anybody and the folks who are at home, Colin and I will talk through this. I'll start, though, before I dig into the why, I would like to just kind of to hit the main points with regard to the resurfacing itself and the bids that we had. So I'll actually pass that to Colin, and then the two of us can talk about the why and what happened and the expectations of that.
Yep, so this is for the sinking fund contract award recommendation for the Stevenson High School tennis court surface renovations. So this is, the scope of this work is drill out and remove the rust spots or the rust causing material in the tennis court surfaces, fill those holes with epoxy Bondo-like material that keeps the playing surface, level, and then apply a stain blocker coat and then 2 color coats as well. Same color, everything's staying the same as it was designed previously. So this went through the public bid process. On February 18th, we received 2 bid proposals for the project. After post-bid interviews and reviewing schedule and scope, the team is recommending Laser Sport Surfacing. They are a company that the district has not worked with before, but Foresight has worked with on other projects very recently, and they've had good results with them.
And for those who don't recall, Foresight,
Sorry.
it might be a name that's familiar. We've been using Foresight for several years with the field projects, the original installation of tennis courts and whatnot. They're basically what you would call the architect for these types of products and programs. It's something that they're actually very busy because many school districts use them, and we've been using them for years.
So including hard construction of $87,900 and construction contingency of $8,790, the total project award recommendation equals $96,690.
This was pretty much on budget. In fact, it looks like it's just slightly under budget by a few dollars, so we're pretty spot on what we thought this would be. And that's going to come into play with regard to the conversation and the background information that we were going to talk with the board about after this. So just to kind of pause there, are there questions on the actual work that's going to be done, the bid process, or the recommendation?
Mrs. Costa.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what we discussed at the previous meeting, that this was kind of an inevitable, but an expected inevitable.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to hit all those
Okay.
those high points. I want to make sure that we do a thorough job, not only for the board, but also for anybody who's at home. It might be a Stevenson parent and saying, how in the world did this happen after just a couple of years? So if you'd like, we can start on going down that. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll start with just following up with what Mrs. Acosta had just mentioned, is that it's not inevitable, but it is an expectation with this type of tennis court project or any type of asphalt project in the way this was designed. It's something we did, I will say this, we did the same exact build at Churchill when we did the Churchill tennis courts. And it's the same type of fill. In fact, the same company, Nagel, did it, and they used the same, they use the same fill from the same area. It's a bit of a hit and miss with regard to natural metals in the earth that are used in the fill. So it did not come through at Churchill. It was in wonderful shape. And I'm gonna pause for a second. I'm gonna let Colin talk a little bit about the process, what it is, why it might happen, and why we knew that in advance. So I'll give you a crack at that, and then we'll come back to some of the specifics of our courts.
So there's metallic materials that come, depends on where you're taking each, mixed design from in the earth. It can be the same mine, everything, and it can be, just a slightly different location, completely different metallic materials in there. And so as the court gets water on it and then bakes in the sun for a year and a half, 2 years, that's what typically when we have these rust spots show up. They don't impact the playability for the most part. Every once in a while you'll have one pop. I don't think at Stevenson right now we have any playability issues, so it's just an aesthetic portion. And then that's where we go into drilling out those rust spots, removing those metallic materials, and then filling back in and recoating the tennis surface.
When we put this bid together, Mike Sims is our architect for this from Foresight Design. And there were multiple LPS team members, Plant Moran, Real Point, and Foresight having the conversation of, okay, this is a known item. It didn't happen at Churchill. We actually talked to Nagel as well, the folks from Nagel about it as well. And they said there's other things you can do. There's other ways you can build a tennis court. You can have what's supposedly clean fill, that the percentage chance of the minerals and the metals in the fill would come up to the top. It lowers that possibility, but it's not a guarantee of it not happening. It's still natural earth material, and you're going to see whatever happens in the environment in that time period still occur. It may or may not happen. That was something that we could consider. We also talked about concrete, which would have like a near zero chance of having this happen to it. And we talked about the prices for those, and they go up quite a bit. So going into this project, we said, if we were to go with the quote-unquote clean fill, we knew that would be at least a couple $100,000 more. And concrete would be even double that, right? So,
I think we bid it.
what's that?
I think we bid it at the time.
Yeah, yeah. So when we did it, when we took the bid out, we purposely did two alternates. Alternate one was for the clean fill, and alternate two was for concrete. And they came in around $250 and $500 more than it would be to do our natural. And we made the decision as a team to say, we know it's about $100,000 to top coat. For $500,000, or even for $250,000, we can do this 2 to 5 times. Not that that's a norm, but it was just the exaggerated point on why wouldn't we just, it didn't happen at Churchill, let's proceed with Stevenson. And again, when we did the Franklins last time, we just said we would be better off doing it at this, and this is a standard build for a tennis court. This isn't something that's funky or people don't do because they have concerns. Asphalt is a very standard way to build a tennis court. We proceeded down that path, and when Stevenson said we're getting these rust spots, we explained to them so they could explain to the coaches and their parents, it's very natural, it's not a playability issue, no one's in danger, it's an aesthetic issue. And we will come back, and they say, okay, well, how fast can you do it? And Colin mentioned, it usually takes a couple years for it to fully form. So we said, let's make sure we do at least 2 years, let it just happen, and we're gonna come back in the summer of '25, do the recoating, and it should be fine. If for some reason something happens again, we'd still be paying, because you can see from the bid that we have, it's under $100,000, it's just under $90,000 to do it, and that's with the contingency. Not that we want to go back and do it again, but we are still saving money from what it would have been, even if we just did the mid-grade version of this build. So,
And
is there, what are you
I was
gonna
gonna
add?
note that there's no warranty on the
Thank
premium
you.
mix design, just because of potential contamination through the equipment and everything. No company will warranty that you won't get any rust spots. So you're paying the extra money, same warranty, essentially, and then you'll have to deal with the rust spots if they pop up.
And I know we got the question of, isn't this somehow on the contractor? It is absolutely not. It is a known item that they explained beforehand. We knew it going into it. It's a matter of That's why we made these decisions to put those 2 alternates in, to get those dollars to see what it would cost. And we knew in our mind the approximate cost of what we're coming to today. And we actually got pretty good pricing on this project to redo the surfacing, the resurfacing at Stevenson's tennis courts. So the plan here was always in the back of our mind to say, let's give ourselves a bit of a safety net and go into this in a smart way, knowing that it might happen, as opposed to having it happen and saying, darn, that's too bad. We kind of knew in advance.
Okay, questions? President Bradford.
Yeah. Okay, so once we recoat it or repaint it for aesthetics and everything, can this occur again?
Yes, as we said, it's possible that it would come back again. So we could always code it again. However, by being patient and letting the first couple of years run through in those seasons, it's usually something from what I've been told, what we've been told from the experts, it generally happens. What comes up, comes up. And if you give it that time to occur, you usually can code it and be good. It's possible we could get some more. There's no guarantees in any of this, because again, we're working with natural earth materials, and if they do come up again, we will check them and we'll make a decision from there.
Okay, and a follow-up. In the case of Franklin is, it's been 2 years on Churchill. It's been 2 years on Churchill, correct?
It's been many, many years.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
Churchill back in 17 or
Oh,
something.
okay,
probably.
so Churchill's
8
had
years
theirs done,
on-
okay, so, and
Yeah,
it
Churchill
never,
didn't, it never happened.
it never happened, so it won't happen then, most likely, at Churchill.
That is the understanding.
But Franklin,
It's already
It
started.
is happening.
it's already starting, so we will
Yeah.
probably
We're
have to
letting-
redo
And
it.
waiting for it
yeah,
to
the
all
question
come up.
came up, why aren't we
Okay.
doing both at the same time?
Okay.
We want the extra year at Franklin.
Perfect.
To give us a little bit more time. I hate to say, let it marinate a little bit,
Yes.
but if it happens, we'll probably see it by the time we get into the end of even the
Okay.
tennis season, because we really started seeing it this past fall tennis season at Stevenson, and we started to put our heads together, and we talked to the principal and the athletic administrator at Stevenson and said, we know about it, here's why it's happening, it's not dangerous, it's only an aesthetic problem,
Yeah.
and we do plan on addressing it. And then again, the question was, why not do Franklin at the same time? And the answer for us was.
Need to let it kind of cure,
Let
I
it, yeah,
guess. or
let it
whatever, cure
keep
at another
going
time.
and work itself out to see how much it occurs.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
So
It was
odds
definitely
are-
a calculated decision. So just, I think that's the most important thing we want to communicate, is it was a decision made with careful consideration and knowledge of this possibility. And certainly on us to not better explain that to you ahead of time. So I certainly wish we would have made that clear when we took that. But it really, I think, still was the best call not to take the alternate and to be addressing it in this way.
Any?
Has any correspondence gone out to, especially the Franklin families that would be using, or the parents? They've got this shiny new thing that's gonna start to not look great. So they would want all the information to be able to tell their kids where, if they're, I could see it almost turning into a bullying point from other athletes that come into play on the surface, if it's not looking the way a brand-new tennis court should. So I guess just making sure that all the families are aware of kind of what's happening, on some kind of correspondence going out there.
Their athletic administrator and principal know about this, and they know that we know about it, and that what our plan is and why we're waiting. So they do know where they've got. I can't answer the question of if they've talked to tennis coaches or tennis families or anything like that. I can check on that.
Okay.
We can
Right.
certainly follow up on that,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but I don't want to speak for them right now, because
Right.
I don't know what that's.
Okay.
We do know that happened at Stevenson.
Yes, there was
Absolutely,
concerns, and when we
so-
explained it to the athletic administrator and the principal at Stevenson, they explained it to their coaches, and that message went out, and everybody said, now we understand what it is.
We can certainly follow up with Franklin.
Any other questions? Just a comment, even with the 10% contingency, you're under 100,000, so.
Yeah. Not that I love spending $100,000 on it, but it's still the smarter move based upon.
It's still
spending
less
so
than
much
when
more.
you
Yes, if we
you
got
would have
another.
paid
Yeah.
upfront for what we'll just call
Correct.
the premium coating, so.
Yeah, correct. That was what our thought
Okay.
process was as well, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I think that was a great decision on your part, so. Okay, if there are no other questions there, then we'll go to 5C, paving bid results. And again, Mr. Francis.
Oh, Colin likes this. This is paving, so.
That's all me?
No, yeah, I'll let you go, just to let you say that there's 3 locations. Central office, we're not doing the entirety of the parking lot here. We're trying to hit the main portions that the buses come down in the first phase of this. And then if you look through the paperwork, you can see that the other 2 were actually alternates, and they came in favorably, so we picked those up. I'll let Colin, I'll turn it over to him for.
You
for
gave
now
all
to
the
go
good
through.
news already then.
Yeah.
Well, then,
No.
he's gonna type up the numbers, and the timing, and all that fun stuff.
So Central Office Phase 2, Franklin partial student parking lot, and Bentley Field track recommendation for sinking fund. So this is to recommend a prime contractor for this project. I guess I'll pause and I'll go back. There is a sheet back for Central Office Phase 2 because it is a little bit more confusing. The red areas are the areas we're talking about.
Unless you printed in black and white like me, and you don't have anything.
And then at Franklin High School, previously there was a project done at the student lot. We kind of did the middle area of it where a lot of the parking spots are for this summer. And then also a 2-inch mill and cap at Bentley Field with track striping. Any questions on the scope?
It's specifically the track. We're not doing any paving. I know folks might hear Bentley and see all that work that's happening out there that the city is doing with their build. This is literally just a couple inches of asphalt onto the track itself. So we have repaired in multiple spaces recently the track. And we also did some work on the fencing and some other beautification projects around the Bentley track. This is that final touch to give it that black asphalt coating, and our plan is also to stripe it so it has some visible lanes. So that's really all that this, it's a very light touch to it. That's all this is about.
So this went through the standard public bid process. And on February 26th, we received 4 bid proposals for the project. After reviewing the scope of work, schedule, and other particulars in a post-bid interview, the team would like to recommend Best Asphalt Inc. as the lowest responsible bidder for the project, including hard construction of $1,318,872 and construction contingency of $131,887. The total project award recommendation is $1,450,759. This includes alternate 1 for Franklin High School, which was the amount of $258,494, and alternate 2, the Bentley Field track repaving, in the amount of $94,859.
We had good coverage on this one too.
Yeah, we got a couple people who've not bid on didn't bid last year, reached out and had good coverage. Really tight numbers as well. Trying to think if there's anything else. But yeah, we saved compared to the budget too, so the numbers continue to kind of stabilize and go down a little bit, so.
Yeah, that was a good bid. So that'll be our summer paving project. The bigger part of it is, the lion's share is gonna be here, and we really do need to do some work at this complex. And as you know, we're also doing the roof on this building, so we're gonna have some busy work going on over
In
the
the
summer
warehouse.
in this area. But the Franklin piece and that student parking lot, that section, it's always a good thing to get those worked on when we can. And I'm excited for the Bentley as well. I know that we have a lot of neighbors that use that track for walking and jogging and whatnot. So that'll be nice touch to it.
Questions? Mrs. Frank?
Phil, do we need to move buses? Will we just move them around the lot, or will they need to go off-site?
No, go ahead.
We've coordinated with Harry, they can be moved around to still have access throughout the whole project.
We'll have we do have some buses obviously in the summer that roll, but we have other ways to put those down. We have other ways to get the bus through, and we'll end up doing that big, long parking area for them in a couple of phases as well, so we can scoot things over.
Other questions? A couple I have felt. Are all three of the projects going to be going on at the same time, or are we going to do one at a time?
They'll be slightly phased. We talked through this. They can do multiple projects at the same time. Coordination with Bentley Track is going to be with the city, so there's a little bit there, and we could also start that earlier potentially than we could start the other projects, just due to school being out and kids and the traffic along here.
Okay, and the track is just, there's not going to be any removal of anything, it's just over the top?
They do mill out, they take out a little bit, a couple
Little bit.
inches worth.
2 inches.
And then lay down fresh.
Okay,
That way it'll be nice and clean. So
Okay.
we already did the repairs, like I said earlier, so now they just have to mill out a couple inches and they get the asphalt over it. And for a track, it's perfect, because it's not like you shouldn't be driving on it. Although I think sometimes people do.
I'm not touching that one. Okay, if there's no other questions, then thank you for.
For the regular, please.
For the regular, yes, indeed. And thanks for being here, we appreciate the info.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
for your time.
Colin.
Appreciate it.
And that is all for building and site.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right, we're going to move on to item 6, our policy committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Frank.
Thank you so much. We are going to look at tonight's policy JBF, and Mr. Green's going to take care of this. Welcome, Mr. Green.
Good evening. What you see here is the LPS Spiritwear quarter zip. Oh, I'm sorry. We're here to talk about board policy. I'm actually very proud to wear this today. We had a district PD today at elementary with district teams, data dives, and PLT time. So it was just great to see how many employees actually did have on their Spiritwear today at their professional development session. So thank you for your support on that. Yes, it's also Miss Bradford's birthday. Happy birthday. And also Mr. Willenborg's birthday. So I would be remiss not to say that I'm going to talk to you about board policy JBF, Juliet Bravo Foxtrot. And that's his birthday gift from me today. So last week at Roosevelt during our study session, we spoke about board policy JBF. There's a few tweaks we're going to make to that policy for first reading for next week. And I'm going to read it to you with the changes. It's the Board of Education grants to the administration the right to release students from school for religious instruction up to 2 hours per week when written notice is provided to the school. And this is under JBF, Students Released Time. And last week we spoke about the why, and that was aligned to our pupil accounting manual and our rules at the state, that if for some reason there was school in session and there was families that requested such religious instruction, they could be released without hurting our ability to collect full FTEs on that student. These are rare instances, but it's a protection for those rare events when that happens. And as I dug after last week's session, I went back to talk to Ms. Major in pupil accounting, and she indeed said it was really a protection that if schools changed the time of day of school and had school overlapping into maybe after-school religious education practices or other services that other faith-based organizations have, that would be something that would be, students would be able to still join those. Like I said, it's rare that we have these requests, but it's part of our policy, and we wanted to be a little more specific on it to just match the pupil accounting rules.
Thank you. Mr. Green, this is in accord with state law?
It is.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the reference number is at the bottom, and it's a part of our state rules. And then in our pupil accounting manual, which comes out each year that cites various aspects of those rules, you'll see occasional updates to those rules. I don't have the history if there was a shift at any one time, but this has been pretty consistent the last couple of years. So when we were going through board policy, one of the things I noticed in the previous policy, it said planned educational activities, but really that's not what this speaks to in the pupil accounting manual. It speaks to specifically religious instruction.
Thank you.
Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Is there any consideration to the change of the name of the policy to student release time? instead of student plural released, student release time.
No S, like take off the S and take off the D?
Yes.
Student release time.
Students is the broad name for that category of policies, so I think students would be appropriate, but I would agree with you on taking off the D on released.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments, suggestions? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Green.
Okay, thank you.
We'll do a first reading on Monday.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And that concludes the policy committee. President Frederick.
Wow, okay, all right, moving on. Boy, this is going well tonight. Item 7, the Personnel Committee. Mr. McFarland.
The Personnel Committee does not have anything for the board this evening, President Bradford.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8, the Legislative Committee. Mrs. Jarvis.
Another birthday present for you. The Legislative Committee has no agenda items. Mrs. Oquist?
You are correct, Mrs. Jarvis, we do not.
Thank you. In the absence of agenda items, I'd like to assure our community that the district is aware of the different things that are happening, the activities and proposed legislative things that are happening that would affect our school district, things like executive orders, proposed budgets. Some of those are in flux. Please be assured that the district is following these items closely, strategizing for what could happen in any possible scenario. We don't like surprises, so we are working very hard to prepare for any possible outcome. We also encourage our community to contact your legislators, both at the state and federal level, and let them know how important it is to you that they support public education.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. That was well said, for sure. And it really is a birthday treat for me tonight because I think we want to wish everybody a wonderful evening, and it's 7:30, and we are adjourned.
What about Miss Rose McFarland? Could we wish her a happy birthday?
Yes, please don't
Very
turn
happy
off the
birthday,
mic yet.
Rose.
Little Rosie McFarland is my birthday twin.
Yes.
So it's all about little Rose. So happy birthday to Rosie. And I think that's about it. Anybody have any other business before the board? Well, good evening. Have a nice night. Thank you.